The morning arrived in Maple Grove, Ohio, the way most fall mornings there did in the early 2020s. Cool but not cold, sun angled low and forgiving, maple leaves just beginning to flirt with red instead of committing to it, the air smelling faintly of damp sidewalks, gasoline, and the kind of optimism that came from football season starting again. The town itself sat comfortably between small and, trying not to be forgotten, a place with vinyl-sided houses, porch flags that rotated with holidays, and lawns trimmed just enough to show pride without obsession. Ethan Caldwell, 34, graphic designer turned remote worker turned guy who worked from home but still needed to leave the house to feel human, parked his slightly dented Subaru Crosstrek outside Birch Steam Cafe, a locally owned coffee shop wedged between a nail salon and a dry cleaner that still smelled like starch and patience. Ethan wore a navy hoodie, clean sneakers that pretended not to be old, and jeans that had survived both fashion trends and the pandemic. He checked his phone, saw an unread email from a client who always said, "quick change," and meant existential redesign, sighed, and decided coffee was not optional today, it was structural. Birch Steam was already awake in the way community places woke up, not loudly, but deliberately. Inside, the chalkboard menu leaned slightly left, handwritten in confident cursive that suggested someone once watched a YouTube tutorial and took it seriously. The place smelled like espresso, cinnamon, and whatever seasonal syrup was currently winning the internal debate. Pumpkin had not yet officially declared victory, but it was circling. Marianne Klein, the owner, mid-50s with silver-streaked hair always pulled back like she was prepared to solve a problem at any moment, chatted with Derek Lawson, a retired electrician who treated his daily coffee like a scheduled appointment with meaning. At a corner table sat Lena Morales, high school senior, earbuds in, sketching sneakers in a notebook with the intensity of someone who already knew she was leaving town soon but hadn't said it out loud yet. Tom Whitaker, 40-something insurance adjuster, scrolled through headlines with the haunted expression of a man who read too much news before caffeine. The bell above the door chimed, and Ethan felt that familiar relief. He had entered a neutral zone, a place where nobody expected him to have answers yet. He joined the line, already rehearsing his order the way people did when routine was the last thing holding him together. Large oat milk latte, 1 pump vanilla, extra hot, simple, dependable, predictable, like his life had been lately, and not in the good way. The barista, Kelsey Nguyen, early 20s, ponytail, chipped black nail polish, and the reflexes of someone who had memorized human behavior patterns, greeted him with a nod that said, "I see you, I will not ask how you are." Ethan ordered, paid, and moved aside, scrolling again through his phone, missing the subtle chaos beginning to assemble behind the counter. The printer spitting tickets slightly out of order, Derek deciding to change his usual, Lena asking for ice water, and Tom attempting to pay with a rewards app that needed an update right now. When Kelsey called out, "large oat latte for Ethan," the cup was already sliding onto the counter. Ethan stepped forward, grabbed it without looking, and took his first sip as he turned away, only to stop mid-stride. This was wrong. Not bad wrong, just unfamiliar wrong. There was chocolate, there was spice, there was foam behaving in ways foam shouldn't behave in his normal drink. He frowned, took another sip, and immediately bumped into Rachel O'Donnell, 30-something elementary school teacher, who was balancing 2 cups and a canvas tote that read "Be kind anyway" like it was a dare. Coffee sloshed. Ethan yelped. Rachel laughed. A napkin intervention occurred. No one was injured, but the moment was public, and therefore permanent. "This isn't my drink," Ethan said, staring into the cup like it might explain itself. Kelsey blinked, checked the ticket, then the cup. "Oh, nope. That's a large Mexican mocha with cinnamon foam. That's for Calvin Brooks." As if summoned by name, Calvin, mid-40s, beard, denim jacket, the kind of man who looked like he owned a smoker and opinions, raised a hand from the end of the bar. "That's mine," he said, smiling. "But honestly, you look like you need it more." The room laughed. Ethan flushed. He started to apologize, but Kelsey waved it off. "I'll remake yours." Or, she glanced at Calvin, "You okay with switching?" Calvin shrugged. "I'm flexible. That one's new for me anyway." Trying to branch out. Ethan hesitated. The obvious move was to correct the mistake, retreat back to the safety of his usual. Instead, he looked at the cup again. It smelled interesting, different, a little bold, a little reckless, even. The room waited in that casual way only small towns could manage, where everyone pretended not to watch but definitely watched. "I'll keep this one," Ethan said, surprising himself first. Rachel grinned. "Look at you," she said. "Living dangerously before 9 a.m. Laughter rippled. Kelsey nodded approvingly, already remaking the latte with the efficiency of someone who loved small moments of human growth more than latte art. Ethan retreated to a table, took another sip, and felt something unexpected: delight. It wasn't just good, it was interesting. Sweet but grounded, warm but awake. He sat there longer than usual, watching Maple Grove move through its morning rituals, feeling oddly like he'd stumbled into a metaphor he wasn't sure he was ready to unpack. Outside, leaves skittered across the sidewalk. Inside, Derek told a story everyone had heard before but listened to anyway. Lena added shading to her sketch. Tom finally updated his app and looked victorious. And Ethan Caldwell, holding a cup he hadn't planned to order, felt something shift, not dramatically, not cinematically, but in the quiet, real way change often announced itself. He didn't know it yet, but this was not about coffee. It was about what happened when life handed you the wrong thing and asked, gently, what if you tried it anyway? By the following Saturday, Maple Grove had leaned fully into fall, the kind of unapologetic autumn that made people dig out sweaters they secretly loved and claim they had always liked soup. The farmers' market took over the courthouse square with folding tables, acoustic guitars, and apples that looked aggressively wholesome. Ethan found himself walking there with a purpose he didn't entirely recognize. He wasn't running errands, he was participating. He wore a flannel this time, boots instead of sneakers, coffee already in hand. Not his usual, not anymore. Birch Steam had become a repeat stop, then a habit, then a place where people started remembering how he took his drink, which was ironic, considering how this whole thing started. Kelsey no longer asked, she just smiled and rang it up. Large Mexican mocha, oat milk, she'd say, like it was always meant to be that way. Calvin would nod from his usual seat. Rachel sometimes graded papers nearby. Conversations overlapped, connections layered. The cafe had quietly rearranged Ethan's social map without asking permission. That morning, however, something was different. A handwritten sign hung near the register. Try something new week, 10% off if you order outside your usual. Marianne stood beneath it like a benevolent instigator. People groaned. People laughed. People ordered the same thing anyway and pretended it counted. Ethan stood in line, thinking, not about coffee, but about the email he'd finally answered differently. The project he'd pitched instead of accepted. The way he'd started walking instead of scrolling. None of it dramatic, all of it connected. When it was his turn, Kelsey raised an eyebrow. You going rogue again? Ethan smiled. Surprise me. Behind him, Derek gasped theatrically. Lena looked up from her sketch, interested. Even Tom paused his phone. Kelsey took this seriously, tapping the screen like a DJ selecting the right track. The drink that arrived was unfamiliar again, lighter, brighter, citrusy. Ethan took a sip and laughed out loud. It wasn't better or worse. Just different, and that was the point. Later, at the farmer's market, he ran into Calvin, who handed him a slice of smoked brisket like it was an offering. Rachel introduced him to her sister. Marianne waved from a distance. Maple Grove felt smaller, warmer, more alive, not because it had changed, but because Ethan had. That evening, sitting on his porch as the sun dipped behind rows of modest houses, Ethan realized the truth hiding in plain sight. Most of life's favorite things began as accidents. Wrong turns, missed plans, spilled coffee, and the courage it took wasn't in fixing the mistake, it was in tasting it before sending it back. Somewhere down the street, laughter echoed. Leaves fell, a town continued being itself. And Ethan, finally, ordered his life a little differently. A simple cafe mistake leads Ethan Caldwell to discover that life's most meaningful changes often begin as small, inconvenient surprises. Through humor, community, and one unexpected coffee order, he learns that growth doesn't require reinvention, just the willingness to try what shows up.
Like and subscribe if you want daily dose of happiness and motivation.